Cal, we got this next one here. It's been taking over the internet because it's huge. Cyberpunk finally launched this week, and there's been some drama as we'd expect. So I did have this thing to take you down the story lane here that I wrote just to kind of quantify what's been happening right now. So Cyberpunk 2077 on PS4 and Xbox One is in bad shape. The last gen base model consoles are struggling to keep Cyberpunk 2077 at a playable state. Players across the net are reporting frame rate drops in the lower teens on PS4 and Xbox One, along with textures that load in like molasses. Adding to that dumpster fire are constant bugs and game freezes, and you're leaving almost half of Cyberpunk players feeling like they've received an incomplete experience. The PC version does contain glitches, but seems by and far the most optimized version of the game. Developer CDPR confirmed Cyberpunk earned at least 8 million pre-orders at launch, with 59% being PC and 41% on console. That means roughly 3 million console players are dealing with a borderline unplayable build of the game, assuming most of these console pre-orders are on last-gen hardware. The mid-tier refresh versions like the PS4 Pro are faring better and performing closer to 30 frames per second, while the current-gen PS5, Xbox Series X are able to hold steady at 60 frames without the full next-gen upgrade CDPR promise will hit sometime in 2021. Cyberpunk 2077 received high critical acclaim when reviews went live on Monday, but curiously enough, outlets were only given PC codes and could not use footage from their own playthroughs. Instead, reviewers could only use promo footage supplied by CDPR until later in the week when the full embargo was lifted. CDPR confirmed on Friday that revenue from digital pre-order sales alone exceeds all of Cyberpunk 2077's production costs and all of the company's marketing and promotional costs for the game this year. So it's a lot that happened to break down. It's been a rough launch for this game, really on console. When you've been seeing this stuff happen and unfold throughout the week, what have you been thinking?
I don't know. It's hard to stick up for CD Projekt Red, I think, especially when there is definitely a bias that people have towards them, whether that's because of The Witcher 3 or the hype that's surrounding this game, or even just the really close connection that a lot of game outlets have had with this game as well. Because even I know on PC it's supposed to run better, but I mean they released that requirements table that said how you'd be able to run it, and that is completely false. It's not at all true, and that came out only a few weeks ago, so not even long before the launch. They should know exactly how this game should run by then. Right. It just doesn't seem good enough for a game that's cost this much money to make, it's taken this long, and has been so poorly sort of not marketed but communicated with its fans as well. It's just not a good look at all, I don't think. And I think as well, coming out and saying that they've already made a profit is extremely bad taste, because all these people have paid for their game and have paid for their game and allowed them to make a profit, and the game's completely broken, and it's right. Just not good. It's not a good thing at all. And I mean, I'm definitely going to end up getting it, but it's really just, it seems very devious. And going back to the outlets as well, games like Days Gone, for example, all the reviews would say things like, the game's really, really amazing. It's a great game, but it has some bugs, so they would mark it down to like 7 out of 10 or whatever, which is still a fine score. But then when you look at Cyberpunk, the reviews mostly center on the bugs, but it gets like a 90 out of 100 or whatever. And that's where I think there's this bias. And I think that bias exists everywhere. I think it exists with PlayStation games, but obviously not Days Gone. But I mean, games like Last of Us and Uncharted, I think these games will automatically get a bit of a buff to their scores just because of the context around them. And I think that's definitely happened here. And I think it's not acceptable. We shouldn't, fans shouldn't accept that kind of treatment. And I think the fact that PlayStation are actually issuing refunds for the first time for people who have bought the game is a huge tell for the state of it. And the fact that it was delayed for these consoles as well is even worse optics. I just don't think there's any way you can sympathize or dress it up. I think, it's a real bad, a poorly sort of planned out release, and they need to be a lot better in future.
You're 1,000% right. All the things you're nailing. And it's a huge bummer with the way that they rolled this thing out, showing off footage with their Night City Wire event. So they showed off console quote unquote footage, and It doesn't seem like, it seems like they purposely showed these moments where the game was running well enough to, to show off. But they have all these pre-orders locked in for a console version that just doesn't work. And it's, it's pretty gross for them to advertise it that way. Now, I think it's important to criticize Cyberpunk CDPR, but I want to say it's at the highest level. It's their executives, it's stockholders making these decisions to go, I don't care, put it out. We hit this date. We can't. We want to hit 2020 release date. But the people that work there just want to do good. They just want to provide a good game, like make a good game. So I feel for them, like being caught in the crosshairs, knowing this game is not ready and having to put this thing out. It's the company as a whole that needs to be held accountable for all this stuff, because they promised a game, secured all these pre-orders, and that is not the game that console players are getting. It's really gross. And then it's going back to some of the reviews. There's this whole big drama with GameSpot, because their review came out and it was a 7 out of 10, which is still a good score. It's actually categorized as good.
Yeah.
And the reviewer, Kaylee Plog, I want to say her name is, received all these like death threats and all the standard like troll stuff that you get, saying she didn't even play the game. And then people get in their hands and they're like, oh yeah, I guess it is, around a 7 out of 10. It's got all these issues. And it's just with that drama. And then there's another well-known Twitter user person in the industry that had just referenced the fact that, hey, there's a lot of these epileptic like seizure moments, and there's not really a warning in the beginning of the game. Like, hey, maybe people should just realize that going in. And then she even got death threats. And then someone found her mom's Facebook page and was like telling the mom stuff about her, like that she needs to, kill herself and all this crazy things, just for bringing up the fact that, hey, some people are going to have issues when this game comes out. Heads up. And then eventually CDPR added that message there in the beginning of the game. There's a lot of grossness, and it's just, does it bring all the trolls out of the woodwork? Is it this game in particular that does that? I wonder.
I just don't know. And I mean, just quickly touched on the epilepsy thing as well as another massive miss from the developers. And it's, I mean, I think the death threats and everything is just ridiculous. And it just seems to be now that, things like Twitter have just gotten so big that everybody can have an anonymous alternate account to do all these things. And it's just disgusting. It just shows you about people and how horrible they can be. And I don't really know what we can do about it. But yeah, I think if this, I'm just hoping that, when the Metascore finally comes out on PS4, and I don't even know why it hasn't yet, but it has to be something really low, because this, I mean, just watching the footage on PS4, it just looks completely unacceptable. And I mean, that I'm not the big, I mean, I really like CD Projekt Red, and but that I'm not one of these people that loved the Witcher games, and I've played them, and I just think that also this game, I think maybe they believed their own hype, and they thought that they could just build this absolutely huge game, and they clearly couldn't, and they've shot themselves in the foot. And apparently it's good on PC, but it's still meant to be full of bugs on PC as well, and a bit under the weather. So I don't know. It's a frustrating situation for people like us who aren't biased towards anything about it, and just wanted there to be a great RPG coming out. And there's no reason not to think it was going to be anything but great with the way they marketed it. And I think that just makes it all the worse when it comes out on PS4 and looks like bloody GTA Vice City.
Yeah, no, there were intentional gross decisions made to market this game the way they did. And I'm not sure at what point that, or where in the latter that decision was made, but yeah, they did promise a game on console, and it is not hitting that mark. So I'm playing on PC. I'm playing the game now on PC.
Oh, nice.
And, I have a pretty beefy machine, so it runs good. Mm-hmm. But even with that, there are countless bugs that you just have to kind of brush aside. There's tons of bugs. This game, as I'm playing it, it's obvious it wasn't ready. I think you would have had to keep it baking in the oven till at least spring 2021, at the very least. I think, of course, we're in the present now. We can't go back, but the move should have been 2 years ago when they had their first Night City Wire event showing off the gameplay. They should have said, we're targeting console, but this game is coming out to PC first. If they did that before they started securing all those pre-orders, it would have helped a little bit, telling people like, hey, the console version is coming, but it's, 5 months, whatever. We're going to secure that PC version of it, get it bug-free, get it ready to go. Do that before you promise console players that you're going to get this a very similar experience on console. Of course, you can't do that now, and you have all those pre-orders made and it's done. But then you're right, where it was extra gross again for them to announce like they made all of the production costs back in the first day. But it's based on those empty promises that they secured when they showed this game off for the first time. So it's just a bummer, man. Like I like this game. It's cool so far, but I'm definitely seeing how it's not the second coming. It's definitely deserving of some kind of like 7-ish out of 10 kind of perspective, because it just needed more time. But for whatever reason, they weren't allowed any more time to work on this.
Yeah, and I haven't even seen, the people who are playing it now on PC, I haven't even seen anybody come out and say, bugs aside, this game's like incredible. Like, it just sounds like it's, an RPG. And
right.
I've heard it's a bit more GTA than like an actual RPG. It's a lot more sort of reactive, and there's a lot more downtime than sort of like maybe The Witcher 3, which is very combat focused. So I don't know. It's a shame, and I think it'll be a massive lesson for CD Projekt Red. And I just wish that companies would start respecting the people who give them money more, because it's just ridiculous now, and it's so transparent who they're really making these games for, and it's not the players who they're making them for. They're making it for the shareholders who finance these projects and things. And you look at Hades, an indie game. Just won Best Action Game of the Year. That's a game made to be fun for the players, and Cyberpunk isn't. It's a game to make lots of money, and they just bit off more than they can chew, I think.
Yeah, it's a bunch of stuff at once, where you're right, where they are making this game for shareholders, or at least they're hitting these bullet points that the shareholders want to be done. It's frustrating because they needed more time, although it's I mentioned before, it's like all these things at once where, okay, you can say, give them more time, but then that just means that team has to keep crunching, another 6 months or whatever. So there's almost no relief in any direction you want to go with like choosing how to launch this game, unless you change at the core level, like how they handle their team and how they handle development. You can't just say, just give more time, because then, people are just going to keep crunching on this thing. It needed more time to bake. There is a lot of, it reminds me a lot of Fallout as I'm playing the game. It does a lot of the Fallout kind of style with how you traverse, but not to that degree, not to that success of Fallout with the way the story unfolds and the choices you have. And I'm not crapping on the game so far. Like it's still fun. It's a really good game, but whether it's our own hype or we believe their hype, but it was kind of put on this pedestal of this game that maybe never will come out, but also it's like it's trying to achieve these things that have never been done before. But it's very much just, it's a game. It's a good game.
Yeah, and I think that's an even bigger blow when it is just good. Like, it's not
right.
It's not this spectacular experience. And that's not. And I'm not saying it's good because the bugs make it worse. But I've had a lot of people say, aside from the bugs, not even including the bugs, the game is fine. Like, it's a good game. And that's even worse. The fact that even when you don't mention the bugs, the game itself is still, alleged. I mean, again, I'm still yet to play it. I might think differently when I play it, but from what I've heard, it's just a good open world game. And it's just, I just wish people be more transparent and with the players, and not, play everyone for a fool just to fill shareholders' pockets and everything like that. So, but going back to what they could have done, I think in the first place they need to have good producers to plan this thing and not make sure it's not too overly ambitious to the point where it's going to disappoint players and make people crunch. Just don't make the game that much bigger. Don't try and include all of these crazy things. Just make a good game. I don't know why games have to be these huge things. I mean, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for example, it's going to take me about probably 80-90 hours to beat, the same amount of time as Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but Valhalla is so much smaller and more focused and concise, and it's so much a better game because of it. Whereas, and Cyberpunk, maybe if they didn't spend so much time making sure you can give your character a big dick or whatever. Like, there's just so many things that they could have spent their time better doing.
Right.
It's always down to, like you said, the executives and the producers and the people who have to make sure this thing comes out on time and it works, and that they're fulfilling, what the players want. Because at the end of the day, it's the players that are keeping them in business, and it's the players that they need to make the games for, and not a way to rub their own egos maybe, and sort of be in history of making the biggest RPG ever. It's not about that. It's about making games that people enjoy playing, and that seems to have been lost, like you said, somewhere in the higher up bits, because I'm sure there's hundreds of developers and writers and artists who have worked their absolute arses off on this game, and I'm sure their work is absolutely fantastic, but it's hard when it's not put together properly, or obviously strewn with bugs. So you've got to feel sorry for them as well as the players.
Yeah, and it's I keep thinking of accountability with whoever higher up that's making these very poor decisions. I don't think we're going to see that, because as CDPR announced that they've made all their development costs back, I think that whoever is making those decisions is now rewarded because they made all their money. All that investment is now recouped. So why change anything? Because it's been a success. So I don't think we'll see any accountability, no changing of various people at the top. It's just going to be the same situation rolling forward. So I don't think we're going to get. They very much have achieved the whole like corpo thing in Cyberpunk. They've achieved that within the way the studio is set up. So at least at the higher up. So they're kind of imitating their own art by having these very gross decisions being made.
And it's like No Man's Sky, which obviously we just saw won an award for best ongoing game. When that first came out, it got absolutely ridiculed because it was touted as this thing, which it wasn't. It was never the thing it thought it was. It was never this massive online game with infinite planets and all these things to do. It was never that, and it might be now, but because it wasn't that, it rightfully got a lot of, not abuse, but a lot of criticism. I mean, I'm sure there was abuse, like we're saying, there always is, but it got a lot of criticism, and I just worry that Cyberpunk won't get that criticism from the places where it matters, because nobody listens to your common gamer. They listen to the big outlets that are affiliated with these games or whatever. And I just hope that and PlayStation offering refunds is a good start, but I just hope that the scope of this game will at least bleed into the industry enough to change things, because it's just getting ridiculous now.
Yeah, you mentioned PlayStation giving refunds. That was announced recently. That's no joke. They don't do that really very much ever. I think the last time was with The Last of Us 2, just because the game was pushed to that indefinite time where we weren't sure when it was going to launch. But they do not do that, so it's not good. They've actually produced a unplayable game on the marketplace, so that speaks volumes there. I mean, we'll keep following this as it unfolds. We'll see if these updates fix it. How CDPR responds, or they just go on vacation and say, sorry, see you later, and they just go and count their money. I don't know. But it's just been a very messy launch for this game that a lot of people were excited about. So
yeah.